It's 3:30 a.m. on New Year's Day, 1994, and Annie Morell stood pounding on the door of her family's home in Bronxville, New York. Snow clung to the edges of the roof, and her breath formed white clouds in the freezing air. But it wasn't the cold that sent shivers down her spine. It was the sinking feeling in her gut that something was wrong. When police arrive and break down the door, they rush upstairs, and what they find will stay with them and Anne's family forever. What's up, guys? Welcome to Crime Snob Podcast, where every Monday we dive into some of those twisted local true crime stories. My name is Sandra Voriello, and I am here with Alice.
Hi.
And if you are a self-proclaimed crime snob like us, then you are in the right place. Today, I'm telling you the story of Anne Scripps Douglas. Okay, so let's rewind for a minute. Before the headlines, before the heartbreak, Anne was just Anne.
Okay.
She grew up in Albany, New York, in a wealthy, old money family and was an heiress to the Scripps family newspaper fortune. Founded by Edward Willis Scripps at the age of 24, what started as the Penny Press in Cleveland in 1878 went on to be a multi-billion-dollar media group.
Wow.
But despite the wealth, Anne wasn't flashy. She wasn't entitled or stuck up. She was sweet, elegant, soft-spoken, the kind of woman who still sent handwritten thank you notes and radiated warmth everywhere she went.
I love that.
Me too. She went to elite Catholic schools and was presented at debutante balls in New York and Vienna, like something out of a movie.
Aww.
In 1969, at the age of 23, she married a stockbroker named Anthony Morell in a lavish ceremony at the New York St. Regis Hotel. Together, they had two beautiful daughters, Alexandra and Anne Jr., who everyone called Annie. And for a while, life was everything that she dreamed of. A beautiful home in Bronxville, a happy family, holidays filled with traditions, Sundays at church, and so much love. But after nearly 19 years together, Anne and Anthony Morell grew apart. By the late 1980s, their marriage had become troubled and unfulfilling, and in 1988, she and Anthony divorced amicably, though.
Okay.
So they were still very, I don't know if they were close, but they were civil
Friendly,
with each other, yeah. Though heartbroken to break up her family, Anne remained on good terms with her ex-husband, and they continued to co-parent their daughters together. Her girls, Alexandra, now a teenager, and Annie in junior high, stayed primarily with Anne in Bronxville, where she continued providing a stable, loving home. Although Anne was heartbroken that her marriage had ended, she was still hopeful, and at 42, she wasn't the type to give up on love, not that easily anyway. It was Super Bowl Sunday on January 31st, 1988, and Anne's friends had convinced her to get out of the house and attend a Super Bowl party at Kelly's Sea Level, a popular pub in Rye, New York.
Okay.
I feel like it's still there. Is that still there?
What is it called?
Kelly's Sea Level?
Maybe.
I'm going to Google that really fast. It is. Okay,
Wow.
It's still there. They are open for lunch at the moment.
Love that.
Wow. So they've been there for
At
a while.
least,
This was, what did I say? This was
at least 40 years.
That's insane. Yeah, 1988.
Wow. That.
All right. So they went to Kelly's Sea Level, a popular pub in Rye, New York. The bar was crowded with locals cheering on the Redskins and Broncos, a far cry from the country club scenes Anne was used to. At the bar, Anne caught the attention of a handsome younger man, and his name was Scott Douglas.
Okay.
Scott Stewart Douglas was 33 years old, about 9 years younger than Anne.
Okay, Anne.
With his dark hair and easy smile, Scott could definitely be charming when he wanted to be. He was rugged and handsome and a local house painter that came from a middle-class family in nearby Rye, the opposite of everything Anne had ever known. Anne found Scott to be sweet, kind, and attentive, and after years of being in a polite but passionless marriage, Anne was swept off her feet by the seemingly down-to-earth man who showed so much undivided interest in her.
I love that for her.
The two struck up a conversation that night, and Scott listened eagerly as Anne spoke of her daughters and her recent divorce, sympathizing with her loneliness. In turn, he shared tidbits about himself. He ran his own small painting business, he rode motorcycles, and prided himself on being a, quote, jack of all trades, handy with the wrench and paintbrush alike. But Scott had some skeletons in his closet that he failed to mention.
Okay.
Scott ever so conveniently left out his struggles with alcohol and depression and didn't even mention his daughter that he had fathered out of wedlock.
Oh my God.
I'm like, I feel like
That feels
Any chance I
important.
get, I would talk about Dominic. Like, the
Right?
fact that you don't mention that you have a child, it doesn't matter, like, married or not married, who cares? But
Totally.
just by the way, I mean, I can kind of get why you maybe wouldn't be like, hi, I'm Scott, I have a drinking problem.
That's fair.
But I don't know. I feel like eventually that should come up in conversation.
Yeah, it was also the 80s, though, so...
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Anne saw only what Scott wanted her to see that night, a hardworking, attentive man who made her feel special again. Their connection sparked quickly, and after that Super Bowl party, Anne hired Scott to repaint a few rooms in her Bronxville home, an excuse to see him again. Soon they were dating, and it was an unlikely pairing in many eyes, but Anne didn't care about the gossip. After years of dutiful living, she felt alive with Scott. He made her laugh, took her on motorcycle rides, and didn't treat her like a fragile doll.
Okay.
Anne fell fast and hard, but her family and friends, not so much. They barely knew Scott, and they definitely didn't trust him. Her daughters said that he seemed off.
Okay.
Even Anne's brother, James, tried to slow his sister down, saying, quote, look, you just got divorced, your father just died, so I guess her father had passed away recently. You just met this guy, give it some time. But Anne was adamant. She felt she'd been given a second chance at happiness after her first marriage, and she was determined to not let it slip away.
A little rebound action.
After 9 short months of dating, Anne and Scott tied the knot. Annie told ABC
9
News...
months is crazy.
So much joke. Annie
How
told...
old was he?
He was 30... Did I say 32? 33? Let's see. He was 33. So
Maybe he was like a little gold digger or something.
I don't know. We'll find out.
All right.
So Annie told ABC News, Annie being the daughter,
Yeah.
quote, we were surprised. We couldn't believe it, but we were also happy because my mom, we thought, was happy.
Sure.
Alexandra, on the other hand, always had a feeling something was off about their new stepfather, and it didn't take long for her instincts to be proven right. I hate that. Those skeletons Scott kept locked up in the closet that Super Bowl night eventually started to spill out. Scott Douglas wasn't the successful contractor he made himself out to be. In reality, he was just a struggling house painter who quickly got used to living off of Anne and the life her money could provide. In that same ABC News report, Annie went on to say, quote, he would scream at her to buy him new cars, new clothes, new shoes. He wanted everything. He said he deserved it.
Okay.
Arguments between Anne and Scott became more intense as time went on, but Anne, her daughters believe, didn't want to face the idea of a second failed marriage. Not after everything she'd already been through, and not in front of the same friends and family who warned her to pump the brakes.
Oh, it's so tough.
I know. Instead of leaving, Anne tried to fix things the way a lot of women do, by hoping that love could heal what was broken. In June 1990, she and Scott welcomed a baby girl named Victoria, who they called Tori.
Okay.
She had chubby cheeks and big brown eyes, and Anne was completely head over heels obsessed with her. And Scott, he played the part, but behind closed doors, the real Scott started to show up. It started small. Scott got irritated easily, snapped at Anne in front of her daughters, rolled his eyes when she talked, got jealous when she wore certain dresses. He'd explode in anger if dinner was served a bit cold or if Anne was late coming home.
Wow.
Scott began drinking heavily around this time, downing whiskey at lunch, polishing off bottles of wine by himself in the evenings. And with alcohol, his temper grew more erratic and violent. Soon the girls couldn't ignore what was happening. Quote, I'd see him rant and yell over nothing, Alexandra later said, recalling how she once snapped at Scott, saying, quote, I think you're trash for treating my mother this way.
How old were the girls, do we know?
So Alexandra, I think, was just under 18 at the time.
Okay.
She was in high school, and then Anne was in junior high.
Got it.
Alexandra, fiercely protective of her mom, moved out of the house as soon as she turned 18, unwilling to live under the same roof as Scott.
Fair.
Annie, however, still lived at home and witnessed Scott's outburst firsthand. She said, quote, I've seen him hit her, push her against walls, throw things at her, kick her, she later recounted, each word painting a picture of the abuse her mother suffered.
Oh, I hate that.
What had begun as verbal fights were now physical assaults, slaps and shoves escalating to full blows. And what used to happen behind closed doors slowly began to show itself in front of family and friends. He humiliated her at a wedding once, dragging her off the dance floor and calling her names in front of guests. I think if I remember correctly, she was dancing with someone.
Wow,
And
okay.
he just, flipped out. But it's it's a family, event. And it's sad because it's it starts small, so you probably make excuses for it, and then it just, before you even know it, snowballs into, how did we get here?
Yeah.
You know? Family members desperately tried to intervene. Anne's brother, Jim, confronted his brother-in-law, telling Scott he needed to stop the abuse immediately, but it fell on deaf ears. Jim then pleaded with Anne to get out and divorce him. Her daughters echoed that advice. They even offered to help her document everything and go to the police. But Anne was paralyzed by fear. Scott knew exactly how to keep her under his control. He threatened that if Anne ever tried to leave or kick him out, he would disappear with baby Tori, and Anne would never see her little girl again. This was Anne's worst nightmare, and so she stayed. In the summer of 1991, after an especially violent incident, Anne did make an attempt to escape. Gathering her courage, she took baby Tori and 20-year-old Annie and fled the house to stay with Alexandra in her apartment. Anne even quietly changed her will around that time, likely to protect her daughter's inheritance in case anything happened.
Smart.
For a short while, it seemed she might really break free, but Scott bombarded her with apologies and promises like so many abusers do.
Mm-hmm.
He swore he'd stop drinking and get help if she came home. He even attended a couple of Alcohol Anonymous meetings to show his commitment. Anne's resolve wavered, and she felt guilty uprooting Tori from her home and was hopeful that maybe Scott truly wanted to change. And only after a brief separation, Anne moved back into the Bronxville house with Scott, giving him another chance.
They so don't change.
Still, Anne wasn't naive about the danger. She quietly began keeping a journal of Scott's abuse with the help of her older daughters. They took photos of bruises, saved threatening notes, and documented dates and details of each violent episode. Anne also confided in close friends about her fear, admitting that she slept with a hammer under her bed at night because Scott's new twisted form of abuse was to suddenly wake her in the middle of the night just to terrorize and yell at her.
Oh my God.
Imagine living in dread like that.
That's terrible.
By late 1992 and into 1993, it was clear to everyone except perhaps Anne that Scott Douglas was not going to change for the better. In fact, he was getting more and more dangerous as time went on. Anne tried to avoid him as much as possible inside of their home. Eventually, she moved out of the master bedroom, leaving Scott to sleep alone while she stayed in a smaller bedroom down the hall. It was an attempt to establish some physical distance, but under the same roof, it only offered little safety. Scott took this as the ultimate insult and began acting even more unhinged. He would prowl the house all night in drunken rages, banging on Anne's locked bedroom door and barging in to hurl insults at her.
That's so sad.
According to Annie, quote, he would bother her all night, babbling, hitting, and punching her. Anne's daughters begged her to leave. They saw the bruises and they saw the fear. And that's the part that's hard to talk about because so many women do go back, you know, and it's not because they're weak and like they're scared. Like I feel like it's hard to, you're in this cycle and it's hard to break out of it,
Yeah, it's like the fear of the unknown too.
Right. And it's like you're scared, you're tired, you're praying that this person that you love is going to change one day.
Yeah, and then they love bomb you and make you think everything's going to be okay and then the cycle starts again.
Exactly.
They say what it takes
I think
7
attempts.
times.
Yeah.
For
someone to finally leave.
Their abuser, yeah.
The Bronxville police became familiar with the address at 18 Avon Road. At least 3 times in 1993, Anne or one of the girls called police to report domestic disturbances.
Wow.
Each time, by the time the officers arrived, though, Scott would calm down or leave the house, and Anne, bruised and shaken, often declined to press charges out of fear. Finally, in late 1993, Anne found the courage to take legal action. She quietly hired a new attorney in November. She told Scott she wanted a divorce and that enough was enough. But do you want to know what Scott's response to that was?
Oh, God.
Scott told her that he would, quote, stop at nothing to oppose the divorce, and he flatly refused to move out of the house, insisting that it was now just as much his house as it was hers.
Wow.
He also threatened a brutal court fight custody over Tori, knowing that this was Anne's weak spot.
Yeah.
What had begun just a few years ago as a whirlwind romance had turned into a hostage situation for Anne Scripps Douglas.
Oh.
And still, she pressed on with the legal route, hoping that the courts could provide the protection that the police visits had not. In early December 1993, Anne achieved a small legal victory. She obtained an order of protection from family court, which barred Scott from taking Tori out of her custody and ordered him to stop harassing Anne. This meant that Scott could not legally remove their daughter from Anne's care or continue his threats without consequences.
Thank God.
However, that order didn't force Scott to leave their shared home. He was allowed to remain living under the same roof because the judge at that hearing didn't mandate an eviction. Anne was beginning to learn how the system in 1993 often failed women like her, especially in cases where judges underestimated domestic abuse in affluent families.
Yeah.
Tension at home was now at an all-time high. With divorce on the horizon and a court order in place, Scott felt cornered. Over the Christmas holidays of 1993, the atmosphere in the Douglas household was explosive. According to one account, the couple had planned to attend a Christmas Eve party, but they never made it. Anne instead spent the night at a Bronxville emergency room after Scott struck her in the head during an argument. She suffered a cut near her eye and needed to get medical attention for it.
The daughter?
No, this was Anne. This was
okay.
mom. Yeah, oh my God, could you freaking imagine? Not that it's any better that it's Anne. But so 22-year-old Annie, returning home from school in late December, was alarmed by how much worse things were in the house now. On December 26, 1993, just after Christmas, Scott visited a neighbor in Greenwich, which, side note, I didn't mention this, but it was reported that while Scott lived full-time in Bronxville, he also kept a small apartment in Connecticut for himself.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So neighbors say that they had no idea that he even had a wife and kids. They just thought that he was like a bachelor.
Wow.
Isn't that weird?
That's so weird.
But anyway, so he poured out his troubles about his failing marriage and made a comment about the various drastic options that he could take. For example, resuming sessions with his psychologist, buying a separate house in Connecticut, taking off for a month in the Florida Keys, or just flat out jumping off a bridge.
Wow.
This is what he said to his neighbor in Connecticut.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Anne was furiously trying every legal avenue to get Scott out of the house. It's like, you have somewhere to go. Just go to your freaking apartment.
I wonder if he didn't have it at the time.
No, I think that's where he lived originally, and then he just kept his apartment there.
Oh, that's
if I remember correctly from what I read. On December 29th, 1993, she and her daughter Annie went down to the New Rochelle family court in person, seeking an emergency order to evict Scott from the home. This was essentially a last-ditch plea because she needed him gone, like now, before something terrible would happen, but they hit a wall. The court staff told them that the judge was unavailable because he was on vacation for the holidays and told them to come back the next day. But when they returned on the 30th, they told them to come back after New Year since the judge was still on vacation, which I don't get why they couldn't just tell them that from the start. The judge was on vacation, Annie remembered bitterly. After weeks of torment with her life on the line, she was essentially told to wait out the long holiday weekend with her abuser still in the house. It was a devastating setback. The system that was supposed to protect her was flawed by scheduling, leaving Anne and her daughters feeling helpless. On December 31st, 1993, New Year's Eve, the atmosphere at 18 Avon Road was charged with dread. Scott was in a volatile mood that day. Perhaps he sensed that Anne was closer than ever to escaping him, or perhaps the stress of the looming divorce and legal battles had pushed him to a breaking point. But whatever the reason, Anne found herself in yet another heated argument with Scott. At one point, Scott's threats and rage were so frightening that Anne broke down sobbing in front of her daughters. She feared he might truly kill her. Alarmed, the girls begged her not to stay in the house that night. But as the evening wore on and Scott left to cool down elsewhere in the house, she dried her tears and told her daughters that Scott was just, quote, in one of his moods again. She didn't want to ruin their New Year's Eve with worry. Concerned for their mother, but wanting to respect her wishes, the daughters made reluctant decisions. Alexandra, 24 at the time, had planned to spend the holiday in Vermont with friends, and despite her misgivings, she left town earlier that day after Anne urged her to go enjoy herself. Annie, home on break, had been invited to a New Year's Eve party nearby. Anne insisted that she go out as well. Annie was torn, but by around 9 or 10 p.m., she decided to head to the party. Before leaving, Annie gave her mom a long hug and one last plea, saying, quote, "Mom, please, you can leave him. We'll figure something out."
Oh, no.
Anne forced a smile, kissed her daughter on the cheek, and sent her off with a gentle, quote, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll be fine. Go have fun." And with that, Annie walked out the door with a heavy heart. Midnight came and went quietly at the Scripps Douglas home, which, side note, how sad is that? Like, to be a mom and to try to hold everything together, you know what I mean? And, like, downplay.
Not want to, like, bother anyone.
Right, not worry your kids,
Yeah.
you know, and, like, really downplay, like, probably how terrified you actually feel inside, you know? Midnight came and went quietly in the Scripps Douglas home. There were no toasts, no celebrations, only a ticking clock and two people on opposite sides of a house now filled with fear. We can only reconstruct the events of the early hours of January 1st, 1994 from what investigators had pieced together later on. But sometime after Annie left for her party, Anne Scripps Douglas went to bed, likely alone in her separate bedroom as she had been doing. Eventually, at some point, exhaustion took over and she fell asleep, still wearing her gold watch and the emerald ring her mother had given her, as she often did. In the silence, Scott Douglas brooded, drank, and spiraled in a rage of anger. He made threats for weeks. If he couldn't have her, no one would. And this was the night that he decided to act on them. Sometime in the deep of night, Scott crept into the bedroom where Anne slept. In his hand, he carried a hammer. possibly the same hammer that Anne once kept under the bed to protect herself. And under the cover of darkness, with cold intent, Scott raised the hammer and brought it crashing down onto Anne's skull as she lay defenseless.
Wow.
Blow after blow rained down with sickening force, causing catastrophic trauma to her skull. Ugh. Anne's blood soaked the bedding, and a neighbor later reported hearing a dog barking frantically around that time, which was likely Anne's terrier puppy reacting to the attack. The commotion woke Tori. This is the part that actually made me want to cry, because I think of Tori was 3. She was Dominic's age at this point. The commotion woke Tori in her room across the hall, and the 3-year-old walked over to her parents' bedroom only to witness a scene of horror. Her mother sprawled on the bed, covered in blood, and her father standing over her with the hammer. That part makes me so sad.
Wow. That's awful.
That's so sad. I can't fathom what such a young child thought or felt, but the sweet innocence of her later words saying, quote, "Daddy gave mommy boo-boos," tells us enough. It appears Scott did not harm Tori. Instead, he left her in the blood-stained room. The puppy climbed onto Anne, licking her face and whimpering as Tori looked on, confused and scared.
No.
Scott then fled. Adrenaline pumping, he grabbed his keys and ran out of the house, leaving Anne for dead. He climbed into his 1982 gray BMW and sped off into the night. Inside the car were some personal items suggesting that he may have been premeditating his attack.
Like what?
So he had his jacket, and he also had an overnight bag placed in the vehicle. And he also brought along the bloodied hammer, now tossed on the passenger seat. He drove north toward the Hudson River. It was a route he knew well, up to the Tappan Zee Bridge, a span of about 3.1 miles crossing the Hudson between Westchester and Rockland counties, about 20 minutes from Bronxville. This was the bridge he chillingly mentioned to the neighbors the day before. Sometime between dawn on January 1st, Scott Douglas steered his BMW onto the Tappan Zee Bridge, which is now named the Governor Mario M. Cuomo Bridge, and he drove to about the midpoint and then pulled over on the shoulder. He left the engine running and the hazard lights blinking, and ultimately, Scott Douglas exited the car and climbed over the railing, disappearing into the icy Hudson River below.
I hate that.
The night was pitch black, the river's current strong and frigid in midwinter, and as of that moment, Scott had effectively vanished. All that remained was his empty, idling car, and witnesses later recalled its headlights flashing in the darkness and no driver in sight.
That's so spooky.
A fucking coward. He is a fucking coward.
Oh, I hate that.
Back in Bronxville, Anne's daughter, Annie, was just arriving home from the New Year's party. It was around 3 a.m. at this time. Perhaps she tried calling the house on her way back and had gotten no answer, but Annie had called the police to request a welfare check at the house, so something must have made her feel uneasy.
Yeah.
She then headed to the Bronxville house herself, but the doors were locked and she couldn't get in.
Oh my God.
Police arrived within minutes of her call, and when they broke in and found Anne in her bed, the scene was grim. Anne was unconscious, barely alive, with severe head injuries and a weak pulse. She had lost a massive amount of blood, and the lead officer gently scooped Tori into his arms and carried her away from the gruesome sight, but not before she made a heartbreaking comment about, quote, mommy's war paint. Stop. Her way of describing the blood covering her mother's face. Paramedics rushed in and began emergency treatment on Anne, immobilizing her neck and trying to stop the bleeding. They rushed her to Westchester County Medical Center, clinging to life. The sun was just beginning to rise on New Year's Day as detectives processed the bedroom for evidence. It didn't take long to identify the likely attacker. Bloody footprints leading out of the house matched Scott's shoes, and Anne, before losing consciousness, had muttered the word Scott, according to one paramedic's account. A county-wide manhunt for Scott Douglas commenced immediately. Police at the Tappan Zee Bridge, upon hearing the bulletin, reported the abandoned BMW with its engine still running that they had found a short time earlier. Inside, they discovered Scott's wallet and ID, his jacket, the overnight bag, and the blood-smeared hammer that had clearly been used to bludgeon Anne. There was no note, but all signs pointed to Scott leaping off the bridge into the Hudson's dark waters below. Could Scott have faked a suicide and escaped? Investigators were not entirely sure at first. The circumstances suggested a murder-suicide, but without a body, they hesitated to close the case. As New Year's Day unfolded, boats and dive teams searched the Hudson River beneath the bridge, searching for any sign of Scott's body. The waters were icy and churning, and after hours of searching, nothing was found. Authorities announced that they would operate under the assumption that Scott might still be alive until proven otherwise. For Anne's distraught family, this was an unimaginable limbo. Not only was Anne gravely injured in the hospital, but the man who did it could possibly be out there somewhere, coming for them next.
Wow.
It's like, did he jump? Did he just try to make it look like he jumped?
Yeah.
Exactly. Anne Scripps Douglas was rushed into emergency neurosurgery in the early hours of January 1st. Doctors fought to relieve the pressure on her brain and repair the crushed portions of her skull. The damage, however, was catastrophic. Anne had suffered profound head trauma, and she fell into a deep coma from which she would never awaken.
Wow.
News of the attack spread quickly among the family. Anne's mother, sister Mary, and brother Jim gathered at the hospital, joined by Alexandra and Annie, her two older daughters, who were in shock. Tori was too young to comprehend what had just happened, and she was taken in by relatives who shielded her from the chaos for the time being. Anne's first husband, Anthony Morell, heard about the tragedy and made his way to Anne's bedside. Anthony was extremely ill himself. He was in the end stages of liver disease, which, I'm going to butcher this, cirrhosis? Is that how you say it? Cirrhosis. And hospitalized near Philadelphia at the time. Upon learning of Anne's condition, Anthony checked himself out of his hospital against medical advice and traveled to New York to see her one last time.
Wow.
He joined Anne's grief-stricken daughters at the hospital.
So sad.
For 6 days, Anne remained on life support.
Oh, God.
The ICU room was filled with flowers and family photos. Alexandra and Annie played gentle music for their mother and held her hand, though she didn't respond. They knew Anne's prognosis was grim, and tests showed little to no brain activity. In their hearts, they realized that their mother was gone in all but body.
Yeah.
This remarkable woman, who had given them everything, lay still and silent, kept alive by machines. Faced with an unbearable decision, the family chose to honor what they knew would be Anne's wishes. She had always been a giving, selfless person, and she would not want to be kept alive with no hope of recovery. Nor would she want her healthy organs to go to waste if they could save someone else.
So horrible.
I know. On January 6, 1994, 1 week after the attack, the family made the painful choice to remove Anne from life support. Surrounded by her loved ones, 47-year-old Anne Scripps Douglas passed away without ever regaining consciousness. The room was filled with tears and quiet prayers. Yet even in death, Anne had one final act of generosity to give. It turned out that she was a match to be a liver donor for her ex-husband, Anthony. Upon her passing, doctors removed Anne's liver and transplanted it into Anthony Morell, literally giving him the gift of life. Wild, right?
Wow.
Against all odds, the transplant was a success, and Anthony's life was saved by the liver of the woman he had once loved and married.
Stop.
Right?
That's so sad.
I know. He would live another 11 years until 2005, thanks to Anne's last gift.
Wow.
Family attorney Stephen Schuckerman? I'm definitely butchering that. Speaking to the press later said, quote, "Her daughters acted on what they knew would be their mother's wishes. Anne left this world the way that she lived in it, loving and giving. It was a glimmer of light in an otherwise pitch black tragedy." Anne was laid to rest, and adding torment to grief was the fact that there was no closure yet. Her murderer had seemingly vanished, which haunted Anne's family in the days and weeks immediately following her death. With Anne's death, the case was now officially a homicide, and Scott Douglas was the prime and only suspect. Westchester County District Attorney convened a grand jury and obtained a second-degree murder indictment for Scott, just in case he was alive and could be captured. Police continued to search for any sign that Scott had survived his leap from the Tappan Zee Bridge. Though many suspected it was a suicide, authorities had to consider the possibility that he staged the scene to throw them off. Tips poured in from people claiming to have spotted him. A gas station attendant in New Jersey was almost positive he'd seen a man that was matching Scott's description, and a report came in that he might have fled to California. The family even offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to Scott's capture. Anne's brother, Jim, a man on a mission, spent countless hours driving around following up on leads. Quote, "I'm working 18 hours a day trying to catch the guy," Jim told a reporter during these tense months. In truth, as the winter weeks passed, the consensus quietly grew that Scott likely had drowned that night. The Hudson River in January is unforgiving, with water temperatures near freezing and currents that can carry a body far downstream. Still, no corpse had been found, and until one was, the case felt disturbingly unresolved. For Anne's family, this meant living in a state of fear even after laying Anne to rest. They took turns caring for Tori, keeping a watchful eye in case Scott somehow returned to snatch her, as he'd once threatened that he would. Locks were changed. Private security was even hired by the Scripps family for a time to guard against the remotest possibility that Scott was in hiding and seeking vengeance. Anne's mother, in particular, was terrified that, quote, if he's alive, he'll come for the girls next. The nightmare would not be truly over until Scott Douglas was found, dead or alive. That closure finally came 3 months later in the spring of 1994.
Wow.
On March 30th, 1994, a railroad employee walking along the tracks in the Riverdale section of the Bronx, which is about 12 miles downriver from the Tappan Zee Bridge, spotted something washed up on the rocky Hudson shore.
No way.
It was the badly decomposed body of a man dressed in jeans and a shirt, waterlogged and partially buried in silt. Police were called, and dental records quickly confirmed what Anne's family had been both hoping and dreading to hear. The body found was, in fact, Scott Douglas. The condition of Scott's body indicated that it had been in the water for some time, consistent with having jumped the night of the murder. Notably, investigators found $507 in cash still tucked in Scott's jeans pocket and a solid gold watch on his wrist.
Wow.
News of the discovery reached the Scripps family that same day. They met the confirmation of Scott's death with relief. It was a surprise, but the nightmare is over, Anne's daughter Annie told the media. Her sister Alexandra agreed, saying, quote, we don't have to worry anymore about him coming after us or Tori. At last, they could close this horrific chapter. No more looking over their shoulders, no more sleepless nights imagining Scott breaking in. The man who had terrorized and killed their mother was himself gone forever. And the case of Anne Scripps Douglas was officially classified as a murder-suicide.
Wow.